I'm delighted to be here for a number of reasons. One is it's great to give a talk where I don't have to get on an airplane first to do that. And I also have great admiration for university, as in many ways the nascent new model of the urban university. And the DMZ, the Data and Privacy Institute with Ann Cavoukian are just a couple of examples of where we're going, really, in the world of post-secondary education. If experiential learning is what we need and it's the future, what have we had in the past? Let's start by trying to understand that. This book, Macroeconomics, was a very good book with a very bad title, actually. Argued that what happened in 2008 was not some kind of cyclical change and the weird slump that we're still in today, but rather it's a secular change. It's a punctuation point in human history where the industrial age is finally coming to an end. And if you look around today, you'll see a whole set of institutions of the industrial age that are in various stages of being stalled or frozen or in atrophy or even failing. Because they're based on an industrial model, which is a big improvement over what we had before, agrarian feudal society, and everything was craft. But the industrial model was about something in the center with power at the top, pushing out standard units to passive recipients, right? Mass production, mass distribution, mass marketing, mass media, mass education. And if you look at all these institutions, you can see that they're stalled versus the contours that are starting to emerge of what the new model is. So in the upper left there, you've got the industrial age corporation, typified by General Motors, America's greatest company. Well, it went bankrupt. The financial system, the core modus operandi of Wall Street almost brought down the global capitalist system. I don't think it's changed yet. Newspapers. The problem that newspapers solve is not really a problem anymore. And I guarantee to you, your newspaper will not be something delivered to your doorstep made of atoms in a decade. Now, with each of these, there are lots of problems. The newspaper, I mean, how do we inform ourselves in a society where the old ways of doing that are collapsing? Is there, in fact, some kind of balkanization that's occurring, a fragmentation of public discourse where we all follow our own point of view? Isn't there a danger we end up in these little self-reinforcing echo chambers where the purpose of information is not just to inform us, but, I don't know, it's to give us comfort? Our old ways of solving global problems, based on Bretton Woods, 1944, that was like 71 years ago. Nation states working together. Well, some big things have changed since then. And then the old models of many other institutions. They're all I'm at the top, I deliver standard stuff to you, and you're inert. You're a passive recipient. I push out products, I push out services, I push out advertisements, I push out TV shows, I push out diagnoses. I'm a clinician, I have knowledge, you're a patient. You don't, get ready, here it comes. I deliver healthcare to you. By the way, the only way you get it is when you're in the system, which is why it costs so much. And please, don't collaborate with anybody else, or don't go on the internet because you're bound to get bad information. Well, when it comes to education, that was the model, wasn't it? I'm a teacher, I have knowledge. You're a student, you don't. Get ready, here it comes. It's one way, it's one size fits all. It's focused on the teacher, and the student is passive in the learning process. Mass education. The lecture, to me, is the process whereby the notes of a lecture go to the notes of a student without going through the brains of either. Now, I appreciate the irony that I'm standing here giving you a 45-minute lecture, but this is actually not a good way of learning. I'm just trying to convince you of a couple of ideas. Lectures are good for that. And this is an experience of sorts, but as you'll see in a minute, there are much richer experiences that we can build. So, first of all, let's start off with, why is this possible? Why can we have experiential learning today? 4 big drivers for change. The first, of course, is technological. We have a new paradigm in technology that has emerged. These are the big ones to date. We've got the rise of the social webs, like 2 billion people now collaborating on Facebook. Mobility, what does it mean for billions of people to have a supercomputer in their pocket, connected 24 hours a day to a high-speed network? Big data, data is becoming an asset class. I think it'll surpass previous asset classes in its importance. We've got stuff like the Internet of Things. The physical world is becoming smart and interconnected. I have a friend in Toronto, everything in his house that has electrical power has an IP address, meaning that all these things talk to each other. I have no idea what his refrigerator says to his toaster. But he was actually bragging to me that his fence talks to his sprinkler. And I said, well, Ken, why would you care? And he says, well, Don, if a burglar comes over the fence, the sprinkler is my first line of defense. Pervasive ambient computing. Imagine billions and soon trillions of inert objects that become smart communicating devices. We have the cloud. Think of the internet as a big computer. We have all these computers within our companies and governments and universities and organizations. We can now move them out onto this cloud where you get better security, better response time, lower cost, better functionality, and most important, the world becomes your software development department. And then we got all this new stuff, drones, robotics, machine learning, and so on. Well, all of these are about to change, and they're about to change by something extraordinary. The biggest innovation in computer science in this generation is the underlying technology of Bitcoin, and it's called the blockchain. Blockchain. Who has heard the word blockchain? Hands? This is so cool. This is like 1993. I'd say, who's heard the word internet? And about 10% of the hands would go up. You may remember this day as the first time you heard the word blockchain. And what it is a massive distributed database running on tens of millions, soon all computers. And it's like a big spreadsheet that enables you to capture the truth. And when the truth is captured, it can't be changed. And you can't hack it. And this enables many, many things. The first era of the internet was an internet of information. We could communicate information to each other peer-to-peer. This next era is an internet of value, where we can share and communicate value in a peer-to-peer way, like money. I can't do that today. If I send you $20 as a file, the only way we can do that is to have a big intermediary, like a government or a bank or a credit card company or PayPal, authenticate who you are, who I am, and to settle the transaction. Imagine if we could do that peer-to-peer. So this is a topic for another day, but it will come up a bit today because blockchains are going to be at the heart of the reinvention of education as well. You heard it here first. Now, a second big driver is we have a new generation of students that think differently. Their wiring of their brains is different, and they learn differently, and that's a huge factor. Now, I started studying kids about 20 years ago when I noticed how my own children were effortlessly able to use all this sophisticated technology. And at first I thought my children are prodigies. But then I noticed that all their friends are like them, so that was a bad theory. So I started working with about 300 kids, and I wrote this book back then in '97. I said, these kids will have no fear of technology because it won't be there. It'll be like the air. It's like I have no fear of a refrigerator, because I don't view it as technology. Well, flash forward to today, they're not just growing up digital, they've grown up. They're coming into the workplace, they're into post-secondary education, big time. they're coming into the marketplace, they're becoming citizens, and there's no more powerful force to change education, or for that matter, every institution, than the first generation of digital natives. I'm a digital immigrant. I had to learn the language. Now, this is really important. People call this the boomlet. These are the children of the baby boom. And we're about to have a whole other generation come in after that. They're now in the high schools. But the boomlet is a bad term because the echo is actually louder than the boom. There's 7.8 million baby boomers in Canada. There are 8 million of these echo boomers. So based on their demographic muscle, these kids alone, these kids are going to dominate the 21st century. But what makes them a real force for change is that they're different. They're the first generation to come of age in the digital age. Now, you notice how this cartoon barely got a chuckle? This is from Growing Up Digital in 1997. When I put this cartoon on the screen back then, people would fall off their chair. They'd be laughing so hard. A baby using a computer. That's crazy, man. And now they'll look at it like, what's that weird thing in the crib, Don? I mean, why doesn't the kid have an iPad or something, you know? Or why doesn't the kid have an iPod? $75 from Tupperware. When your baby's toilet trained, you have a little nice bowl you can use too. Ew. So we studied 11,000 young people in 10 countries. Biggest $4 million project that I led. Biggest study of any generation ever. And there are 8 norms that define this generation. You're building a school, a university, a learning system, for that matter, a company, a government, a democracy. These are the 8 norms. A generation that wants freedom of choice. Choice is like oxygen. You know, when I was a kid, there was one newspaper came into our house. They want to customize everything. I never got to customize the Mickey Mouse Club. They're a generation of scrutinizers. When I was a kid, I saw a picture. It was a picture. Generation with very strong values. It's just not true. They're a bunch of narcissists that don't give a damn. There's no evidence to show that at all. They want to collaborate. I grew up being the passive recipient of TV, 24 hours a week, average for a baby boomer. These kids grow up interacting, collaborating. They're the organizers, the thinkers, the authenticator. That actually affects brain development because how you spend your time as a kid is the most important variable determining the actual wiring of your brain after your DNA. They like to have fun. They want things to happen fast, and they're a generation of innovators. Build your learning systems around these 8 norms. Now, the next big change is a change that affects post-secondary education. It's a change to the deep structure and architecture of the firm and of our organizations. This is kind of a long story. I won't go into it, but too much. But this guy, Ronald Coase, argued 80 years ago in a deceptively simple paper. He said, why do we have firms? If Adam Smith is right, and the open market's the best way to allocate goods and resources and information, why isn't everybody an independent contractor at every step in the way in production? He said the answer is collaboration costs. These are transaction costs. But the cost of search, he said, is like 80 years ago. The cost of finding all the right people to do something, the right information, this would be totally prohibitive. So we bring that inside the boundaries of firms or organizations where we have things like filing cabinets to get information, org charts to find people, and so on. So the industrial age corporation was an entity of vertical integration, and it was a hierarchy. And it worked really well. That was the vehicle for mass production. And, but, you know, information technology started to make the boundaries of these firms more porous. Then we had the internet, where companies began to unbundle into networks. Cisco figured this out. A business model conferred competitive advantage to them. And now, especially with blockchain technology, the costs of transactions and collaboration in an open market are going to plummet so much that this will cause us to rethink the way that we orchestrate capability in society. So universities are going to become more open in the real sense of the term, that their boundaries will be more porous, and there will be people inside and people outside that are all part of the university. So a little taste of this is just a Toronto story. Does anyone recognize this guy on the screen? The reason I know this story, he's, until a couple of months ago, was my neighbor for 20 years. And actually, probably more like 15. And he moved onto the street, and his name's Rob McEwen. He held a cocktail party to meet the neighbors. He said, "You're Don Tapscott, great, I've read some of your books." I said, "Great, what do you do?" And he says, "Well, I used to be a banker, and now I'm a gold miner." Now, he's a funny guy. He introduced his wife to me. He says, "My wife, Cheryl, she's a gold digger." But thankfully, she is not. She's a brilliant entrepreneur with a sense of humor. But anyway, he tells me this amazing story. He takes over this gold mine. His geologists can't tell him where the gold is. He gives them more money to get more data. They can't tell him where to go into production. This goes on and on for years. Finally, he's ready to give up. He has an epiphany. He wonders, if my geologists don't know where the gold is, maybe somebody else does. So he does a radical thing. He takes his geological data and he publishes it and holds a contest on the internet called the Goldcorp Challenge. It's basically $500,000 in prize money for anyone who can tell me, do I have any gold? And if so, where is it? He gets submissions from all around the world, from all these companies. They use techniques he's never heard of. And for his $500,000 in prize money, my friend Rob McEwen found $3.4 billion worth of gold. And the market value of his company went from $90 million to $10 billion. And I can tell you, because he's my friend, he's a happy camper. You know, we think about organizations as talent is inside, right? Your most precious asset goes out the elevator every night. Well, for Rob McEwen, the uniquely qualified minds to solve this problem were outside. The final big driver for change is a social revolution. And this is about self-organization. It's really important to understand this because everyone can self-organize, especially students. So I'll just give you a humbling little story here. It was about 8 years ago. Somebody sent me an email saying, you know, this senator in Illinois thinks that your book, Wikonomics, is the key to winning the presidency and changing America. Go to mybarackobama.com. So I went there, and there's my book right on the screen. And we believe in the internet and collaboration, and the book Wikonomics by Don He's saying, I'm asking you to believe not just in my ability to bring about real change in Washington, I'm asking you to believe in yours. And I looked at this thing and, well, my first reaction was, I am the man, clearly. But not so fast, Don, because it turns out I'm not the man. Because there's a Wikonomics community, but there's also a single moms for daycare for Obama community and a young firefighters for Obama community. He created this platform whereby 35,000 communities self-organized. They raised $100 million, and that's what brought him to power. So this is a powerful and revolutionary force, and I say that advisedly. You know, during the Arab Spring, in the early days, students, well, it all started in Tunisia. Students were being killed by snipers from the regime, unarmed students demonstrating in the streets. So the kids would take their mobile device, triangulate the location of the sniper, send that information to friendly military units, come in and take out the snipers. You know, you think social media is about hooking up online? For these kids, it was a tool for self-defense. So I know that this is a big mess when you think, although Tunisia is doing well, but it turns out these tools help you bring down a regime, but we've not yet figured out how to help us build a new organization that can take power. But don't be discouraged, because the arc of history, to me, is a positive one, and this is going in the right direction. Now, there is a final cautionary note, though, is that for young people in Canada and throughout the developed world, we told them, you work hard, you stay out of trouble, you go to school, you be a good kid, you can have a prosperous life. Well, for the first time in modern history, the 51st percentile is now declining. And prosperity is now a broken dream. We have wealth creation, but we have growing social inequality. We have growth in the GDP, but we have structural unemployment. We need to fix this. And this is data from a database going back since I've been writing about this, about the number of protests in the world. 25 years ago, there were 6,000 protests. Last year, there were 260,000 protests. Young people at their fingertips have the most powerful tool ever for finding out what's going on, informing others, and organizing collective responses. And when I speak to CEOs and business audiences, I just got back from Davos, I say, we need a new social contract in society, and we need to fix this, or the 1960s is going to look like kids' stuff. All right, so that's a preamble to the big changes. Where are we going with education? Well, you know the idea of a burning platform, that you're somewhere where the costs of staying where you are become bigger than the costs of moving to something new? You're on an oil rig, it's on fire, the costs of staying there become greater than the costs of going to something new, even if the new paradigm is not fully understood. That's where we are with education. We have the irresistible forces of technology and demographics and economics and society pounding upon our education system. And this is a knowledge economy, and it's a networked age, and tinkering with the old model of the university, to me, is not what's required. And if that feels like an extreme statement, I could make the same statement for every one of these 16 institutions. Now, it takes about an hour to go through each of them. I mean, if you guys got 16 hours, we can do this. No, seriously. Let's look at the universities and the schools. First of all, what does it mean to be in a knowledge economy? Well, it doesn't mean we're all going to eat knowledge or something. It means that each economy embraces the previous one and transforms it. So just like the industrial age transformed the agrarian age with tractors and milking machines and so on, this digital age is transforming the industrial age, where we have robots, factories brimming with robots now, and all this technology infusing itself throughout industrial production in every nook and cranny of the economy. But it also means that the driver moves from brawn to brain. And the means of production, in some ways, is contained in the crania of you people who are going out into the workforce. And this has huge, huge implications. You know, when I was a young person, you graduated, you're kind of set for life. At least that's what we thought. You kept up in your chosen field. Today, when young people graduate, they're not set for life. They're set for about, 15 minutes. And if you took a technical course in your first year, a third of what you learned is obsolete by the time you get to your fourth year. So lifelong learning is just not some kind of slogan. This is the real deal. You need to reinvent your knowledge base multiple times as you go throughout life. And your degree at Ryerson is like a milk carton. It's got a time stamp on it, and it's going to go sour unless you keep rebuilding your knowledge base. And this has huge implications for many things. For example, sure, we need STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. And if you have a STEM degree, chances are you're going to get a job pretty fast. But we also shouldn't throw away liberal arts, because what you know when you graduate, to me, is not the most important thing. What's important is your capability, your capacity to think critically, to solve problems, to put things in context, to understand the interrelationship between things, your passion, your love of learning, your desire to reinvent your knowledge base multiple times, your ability to work in teams. just go to Google and look at what Google's looking for. Highly desirable employee. You know, there's nothing there about skills. They want to know about your ability to think critically. They want to know about your ability to collaborate in teams. They want to know about your problem-solving ability. There's no right answer to these problems they give you. They want to know how you think. They want to know about your googliness, meaning how you'll fit in with the culture, how you can work with others, what kind of person you are. So if you're taking a technology course, I highly recommend you take some arts. Let's call it STEAM. And if you're taking arts, humanities, whatever, by all means, take a computer science course, because everyone should know what a program is and how to program. So let's not have a battle between technology and liberal arts. Let's understand that both are critical. Now, what I'd like to take you through in the time that I have left is some big transformations that end up with experiential learning. I think that we need to have new models of pedagogy because the old industrial age model is inadequate and is being bypassed. There are new platforms for collaboration. I heard the term co-creation being used in some of these videos, and that's great. I think we need to rethink the classroom. We need to rethink assessment and evaluation. And overall, we need to rethink higher education and how content gets created for post-secondary learning. So these are some big changes. There are others, too, the relationship between the university and other institutions in society. But in my remaining 20 minutes, I'll spend a couple of minutes on each of these. First of all, new models of pedagogy. Well, as I said, the old model is focused on the teacher, right? It's one way, it's one size fits all, and the student is isolated in the learning experience. We can now move to a new model. I mean, how weird is it that in this day and age, you have statistics professors standing up at the front of a class teaching, broadcasting one way, one size fits all to students about statistics. There is no one size fits all about statistics. You know, everyone in the class is either bored or they don't get it. Now, in 1975, I did a master's degree in education. And I took a graduate course in statistics, and there were no lectures. 1975. We learned on a computer. We had self-paced interactive computer learning. And I went through stuff. Analysis of variance, here's what it is. You want to test yourself on this? Okay. Then a little slide projector, rear projection would pop up with a little graph and some charts and stuff. I went through this at my own pace. I remember thinking, wow, if someone saw me going through this again, they'd think I'm really dumb. But nobody saw me, so I went over it until I got it right. I got an A. In fact, I ended up being really good at statistics. I ended up getting a scholarship that funded my entire master's degree. And I thought, wow, computers are amazing. I mean, 5, 10 years, there sure won't be any lectures left. 75, 85, 95, 100. That was 40 years ago. And we still have this weird model. Now, there's a role for a lecture, but this should not be the dominant model of pedagogy. I would recommend that we get rid of most lectures and replace it with 4 things. One is, wherever there's a right or wrong answer, mastery, that should be learned on a computer, the way that I learned statistics. In your dorm room, in your parents' place, your apartment, whatever. Because that's just a better way of learning. Self-paced. Test yourself, get it right. And then that frees up everybody, the student and the lecturers and the professors, to do what's really important. First of all, small group discussion and debate. Second is in-classroom experiences. And third is projects. My daughter graduated in her master's MBA from INSEAD, which is actually just rated by the FT as the top business school in the world. And she had to do a project with her friend Joanna Griffiths, and 45 teams had to come up with a business plan and think it through, negotiate the whole supply chain and everything. They won a company called Knixwear, Reinventing Women's Underwear. High-tech multitasking underwear. Your underwear should do more. Underwear for the good. Never mind, don't ask. Anyway, so they did this. They won. It's like 25,000 euros prize, big panel. And she learned more doing that project than anything. Oh, did I mention they also went and set up a company? It's a rocket. Hiring people, global supply chain, and so on. Wow, what a difference listening to some business prof talk to you about entrepreneurship. So mastery, do it on a computer. There's a right or wrong answer, freeing up for three things. Small group discussion and debate, in-class experiential learning, and projects. It's not that hard. All the research shows that's a better model. So let me just give you an example of an in-class experience. This is me. I was in Portugal. Every kid in Portugal got a computer. It's called the Magellan program. And the teacher stands up at the front of the school and says, okay, kids, today we're going to learn about something called the equinox. Who knows what an equinox is? These are like 7-year-olds. Nobody knows. And so she says, okay, you know the thing. Go do it. And they know the thing. They got to go figure out what an equinox is. They can do it by themselves in a small group. So all of a sudden, you got all these kids. They're online. They're in Portuguese Wikipedia and Google. And finally, this one little group says, we know what the equinox is. They stand up. They explain all that to the classroom. The teacher's interacting with them. It's a noisy classroom. Everyone's, yeah, well, what about this? And they're interacting. They're loving the equinox. They're loving astronomy. They're loving learning. And they're loving a new paradigm in learning. They're a bunch of kids that are turned on and excited. Kind of different than a lecture. So this is the model, blended learning and flipped classrooms. And you all know what that is. You do the mastery by yourself, and you come to the classroom for the experience. Now, we can also have all kinds of flipped web content, and it can be included in all kinds of video-type lessons. But one thing that we don't want to do is in the flipped classroom, you don't want to just go and listen to lectures by yourself on a computer. That's the old paradigm. It's just replacing the old paradigm with technology. You want to have an interactive environment which is self-paced and where you can go through it yourself. Now, I know throughout the day here you're talking about games, and I just wanted to say something about this. So this is called Game Changer. And these are basically epistemic games. They're computer games that are essentially about learning to think in innovative ways. They're designed to be pedagogical tools for the digital age, and where the player learns to think like a professional playing a simulated game in a profession like engineering or journalism or urban planning or whatever. So you create these virtual internships where all of a sudden you're thrust into an environment where you're having to be an engineer or an artist or a scientist. And this is an experience. It's interactive, it's self-paced, and it's collaborative. Okay, secondly, let's talk about platforms for collaboration. There are all kinds of exciting ones that are emerging. This is just using co-constructed course blogs and wikis. So you collaborate together to create a blog or a wiki. You learn how to partner, you work in teams, you learn about the loser on your team that doesn't really contribute, or somebody's a real creative person but they're not a good writer, someone else is a really good writer. You learn, this is like peer-to-peer learning. These platforms enable students to contribute knowledge across all kinds of contexts, both at home and at school, and they serve as a shared knowledge base. And platforms like this can also be used for coordinating student activities, collecting homework, doing all kinds of stuff like that. Then we have real-time collaborative learning. So Etherpad is one example, a customizable open source online editor providing for collaborative editing. Who here has written a Wikipedia article? Homework assignment. Go and write a Wikipedia article. Oh, by the way, if you want to come work for me, I'll be impressed that you did that. If I have someone who graduated from Harvard Business School with an MBA versus someone who's written 50 Wikipedia articles, I'm going to be more impressed by the second person because they took initiative, they know about technology, they know how to collaborate, they know how to defend their ideas, they have subject matter interest and expertise, they understand new paradigms in collaboration, and so on. And Etherpad, Google Drive are examples of these new tools. So then you have media-centric collaboration stuff. So this is called, this one is called ThingLink. It's basically an interactive media platform that allows publishers, educators, brands, bloggers to create more engaging content using rich media. And increasingly, this is what we do. You know, we don't just write stuff down for books, which are kind of old school. By the way, do buy my new book. The way to get it is in massive volume, by the way. Christmas, coming soon. But, you know, we're also, you buy the book, pre-order the book now, we'll give you a whole bunch of cool interactive infographics and all kinds of stuff like that for free. So we're having to bundle in this whole multimedia world into the traditional model of the book, too. Because let's face it, the book's pretty old school thing. You know, it's made of atoms. It doesn't have hot links. It's not kept up to date. It's not real time. And it's not multimedia. And it doesn't enable collaboration. So even people like me, authors, are having to bundle in all this other content in with books. Okay, rethinking the classroom. The physical classroom is changing as well. Remember that? You may not. I do. This is where we're going. Active learning spaces. Now, these include work surfaces for notebooks, laptops, textbooks, allowing small groupings, multiple signatures, multiple sight lines to others, configurable furniture, access to resources, learning materials, and so on. But the learning space is also not just the physical space, it's what you bundle in as well. So these are smart student response systems. You have these things where you get to vote and so on. Again, in a small group discussion or even in a larger group discussion, you can interact, get a sense of what people are thinking and so on.
Hi, Commander Hatfield. My name is Zofisha Siddiqui and I'm in grade 3. I would like to know, do you think you are going to find something interesting up in space that you can use for science? If you do, what do you think it might be?
This is extending the classroom into space.
We're finding out all sorts of things. Behind me right here is a Canadian experiment that's looking at how to make materials better like paint, where there's little tiny bits of stuff dissolved in a liquid that on Earth they behave differently because of gravity. We're also collecting energy from the universe, trying to find out what the universe is made of. We're collecting dark matter and trying to understand antimatter. And there's a big magnet on the top of the space station, collect that. And we're also understanding the human body of how our system works better, how we balance, how we see. Because when you take away gravity, a lot of things change. So it's a really good laboratory to study the body. So I think there's all sorts of different things we're going to find here that are going to help us understand the universe better and help us live better on Earth.
So breaking down terrestrial walls as well in the case with Chris Hatfield. Okay, assessment and evaluation. Again, big changes underway. Now, in the old day, it was, I'm a teacher, I have knowledge, you're a student, you don't, get ready, here it comes. Your goal is to take it into short-term active working memory and through practice and repetition to build deeper cognitive structures so that you can recall it when I test you. Drill and kill. Sage on the stage. Well, there's a lot wrong with that model, but we can go far beyond that into some pretty exciting new stuff. So the old is you're testing for content knowledge, but as I said with the Google example, Google doesn't really care about what you know, at least about your skills. They're more interesting in domain knowledge to solve real-world problems. And this is, the image here is Merritt Island students working with NASA mentors to build a tiny satellite. Do you know the idea of feed forward? This is a guy named Marshall Goldsmith who developed this notion that feedback is fundamentally flawed in some ways. It focuses on the past and what's already occurred. It doesn't really help you with learning, only in a sort of indirect way. And it's limited, it's static. Feed forward is something that's expansive and it's dynamic, and you can build all kinds of ideas and suggestions and proposals for the future to help students learn better and navigate through a learning experience better.
Lightside Revision Assistant is an online tool to improve student writing. Revision Assistant gives students automated assessment of their essays on demand and at their own pace. We're making it feasible to assign writing in the middle and high school classroom. We provide automated feedback to students in the form of a signal check. First, they're going to see a graphical indicator of their progress on a rubric tailored to the writing assignment. Next, within the text of a student's essay, our algorithms are going to highlight particular areas of strength and weakness. This is important because it gets the student going back, rereading their own words, seeing that the feedback they're getting on the rubric ties directly to what they chose to write. Alongside these highlights, Revision Assistant generates comments. Now, these comments follow specific strategies that we believe will keep students writing.
Okay, so I'm running out of time here. I'll cut that short, but you get the idea that you now have technology that can interact with you real time, as opposed to batch feedback. I do all this work, I perform a test, and then I find out how I did. It's real time. You know, as you work, you're getting constant feedback and constant improvement. Now, we've also got learning management systems, LMS. Who's familiar with that idea? Okay. Many of you, so I won't go through it. But the idea is that you have big data, and big data can be applied to all kinds of things, and one of them is to learning. So this is a desire to learn Brightspace, and this is providing the data to help identify students at risk, to provide teachers with actionable insights so they can intervene early, to help students make informed decisions so they can graduate on time or at all, to keep students engaged in school, using data to inform institutional decision-making and research. So like the Rob McEwen story, I mean, data is one thing, but you need these really cool analytics like D2L provide to be able to do that. D2L, this is a Canadian company, and you use them here, also has a new product called Degree Compass. And this is a real-time, personalized course recommendation system that helps you figure out what are the courses that you should take. And students that use this end up performing better and graduating more successfully than students who don't. So the final thing I'd like to just talk about is about reinventing the university itself. And I'd like to tell you a story to make this point. So this was in 2008, and I was asked by the management of Florida State University to have a very long lunch with them, 25 people, the deans, the president, and so on. And they're doing $1 billion fundraise. They want to position themselves as the first 21st century university. So they said, what does that look like? So I went through my thing. You kind of get the idea, right? Need to change the model of pedagogy, because we have a new generation, they think differently, that, you know, TV was and broadcast was fine for my generation. These kids have grown up learning differently. Their brains are different, so on. So at the end, I gave about a little 20-minute talk. We're all sitting around this, seated around this big table, and we're eating our lunch. And so the dean of the film school is kind of chairing this, sitting next to me. He turns to a youngster named Joe. Joe is 22 years old, and says, "Joe, you're our only student here. Why don't we start with you? What do you think?" And Joe says, "Well, I've been listening to this, and it's resonating with me. I think that reflecting on what Mr. Tapscott said, I think we do learn differently as a generation. I'll give you an example. I don't read books." And the look in the room is kind of like the look in this room here now. He says, "I think I'm knowledgeable," and I'm paraphrasing here. He said, so he's saying, I know what's in books, but I don't read books. I go onto the web. It says I got good BS detectors. I can figure out what's good information, bad information. If I have to read a book, I don't follow someone's narrative. From the beginning to the end, I'm in the table of contents. I'm out on the web. I'm in the index. I'm reading a chapter. He says, "I don't read books." So the dean says, "Well, thank you very much, Joe. I don't know if that's very exciting for us or if it means the end of civilization." So they have this amazing conversation. I'm thrilled. They're challenging all kinds of fundamental things about the university. And at the end, it goes on for about 3 hours. And at the end, I go to Joe and I say, "I'd like to get to know you. That was really interesting. Could I interview you for my book?" Because I was just finishing up Growing Up Digital. And yes, life is full of ironies. But he says, "Well, I'm going to Fort Lauderdale, and I have to leave right now." And they'd given me a plane for the day. So I said, "Great, come with me. I'll take you there. I'll hitch your ride with me." So we get in the plane. I started interviewing. I said, "Tell me about yourself." He says, "Well, what do you want to know?" And I said, "Well, what kind of student are you?" And he says, "Well, I'm a good student." I say, "How good?" He says, "Well, I've always had A's, 4.0 grade average." He's a perfect student, actually. I said, "What else do you do?" And he says, "Well, I've been the president of the Students' Council here for a couple of years." Why they invited me, I guess. I've got a budget of $12.5 million. I'm on 18 committees. I chair half of them, and that takes some time. And I'm like, "Well, I'm sure that does." And I said, "Do you do anything else?" He says, "Well, the really big thing was my girlfriend's from New Orleans, and when Katrina hit, we went there to see if we could help. And there was no healthcare clinic in the whole devastated 9th Ward. So I set one up." I said, "You set up a healthcare clinic?" He says, "Yeah, you have the internet. You can do anything. You need an air conditioner. You can get an air conditioner." And I said, "Wow, that's amazing. How did it work out?" He says, "Well, great. It's still functioning. It's called the 9th Ward Healthcare Clinic. It sees 9,000 patients a year." And I'm like, "That's good. That's good." I said, "Tell me about your family." He sighs. And I'm wondering, what's going on here? He says, "I lost both of my parents in the last year. One got sick, and the other was an accident." And I said, "Oh, God, that's terrible, Joe." And I said, "Do you have siblings?" He says, "Yeah, a whole bunch of them, and I'm the eldest, so it's my job to keep the family together." I said, "Well, how do you do that? And are they in Tallahassee?" He says, "They're in Lauderdale." And I said, "Well, how do you do that?" He says, "Well, we're online all the time." He says, "The great thing I found out is we created a family guild on World of Warcraft, and we slay dragons together as a family. It's awesome." I said, what are you doing next year?" He says, "Well, I'm going to England. I'm taking a master's degree. And I'm so excited to have the British healthcare system because we never went to a doctor when we were kids. We were poor." So he knows about the British healthcare system. He knows about Ronald Coase's theory of the firm. He actually knows about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. He's pretty much as knowledgeable as anybody I've met. He doesn't read books. So I said, "Well, what are you studying?" He says, "I'm doing a master's in philosophy at Oxford." I'm like, Oxford and Cambridge would be the two hardest places in the world to get into. I said, "That's awesome. How did did you get some kind of funding to pay for this? Because I knew he was poor. He says, oh, yeah, it's great. I got this scholarship. It covers everything. I said, great. Where'd that come from? He says, it's called a Rhodes Scholarship. Bob Dylan. There's something going on here, and you don't know what it is. The Rhodes Scholar from Florida in 2008 doesn't read books. So this little vignette captures to me. You focus on the student. This is the first time in history when children can show us the way forward. And the most powerful force to change post-secondary education is the students. Listen to them, and they will show us the way. So just to close off, actually, I'm out of time. This is awesome. What can I say? This is absolutely the future. Entrepreneurship is key anyway, because 80% of new jobs come from companies that are 5 years old or less. But also, Canada needs to move from a resource-based economy to an innovation economy. And this is just the most inspiring initiative, to me, in the world, in terms of post-secondary education to achieve that. So replicate this everywhere, in everything. You know about MOOCs. The whole thing about MOOCs, of course, is not just to move lectures online, but we need to move towards a MOOC like the one I had in 1975, which is interactive and self-paced, and then enables you to master content. And then we need to create the meta-university. How weird, that statistics lecture? It's not weird, not just weird that he or she is broadcasting statistics. It's that those notes and those tests and those PowerPoints and those software programs, everything else that professor uses were created by that individual. How can this be that we have 10,000 statistics professors all creating their own little content? You know what we need? We need a global network for higher learning. Now, the MIT OpenCourseWare initiative is a good first step, but it's just exchanging content among professors. What we need to move is to a second step where we have real content co-innovation. There are probably 3 best ways to explain what an analysis of variance is, not 10,000. And we should have the best one. They're different culturally, probably. We need statistics professors to collaborate to do that. And ultimately, don't we need the school and the university as a place, rather than just a place? And there's a role for the place. Martin Dressler is the dean of sociology. We're having a big discussion at Princeton for 20 years. And he had just retired. And we're having a discussion about the physical place. He says, Don, the place is important. The university is a place where young people can go for 4 years and get older. And he says, they're bound to learn something while they're there. And so there is a role for the place, but we need to make this place more a node on a global network and not just an isolated
These
place.
are questions that seem to transcend.
This is a woman who works for me who's actually a PhD in education. And I discovered her when I found this video online. And it's a video that talked about me. And I thought, who the heck did this thing? And I checked it out and I decided she
These
was
are
great.
questions that seem to transcend disciplinary boundaries and require the very type of collaborative problem solving they seek to address. Thank you all for such an engaging and informative discussion. Do you have any final words of wisdom?
It's a hard problem, and no one should expect quick results. You can't force progress in theories of learning, and you can't have applications for learning without the theory.
It's not about standardizing, but about raising standards, and that's something different.
Victor Hugo says there's nothing so powerful as an idea whose time has come. The time has come for us to reinvent education, and thankfully we have a new generation that is going to make it happen.
Do I look that bad? Anyway, so just to sum then, we have a burning platform because of these 4 drivers for change. The schools and the universities are one of at least a dozen institutions that need to move from the industrial age to the collaborative age, the knowledge age. We need experiences in learning. And when you get a new paradigm, and that's what this is, you get a leadership crisis. Leaders of old paradigms have great difficulty embracing the new. And you were very fortunate to have somebody like Sheldon Levy, and now it's infused throughout the leadership of this place. And you're very fortunate to have a bunch of students that this is kind of in your DNA. You think that's the way university ought to work. You can be leaders showing the world how to move towards experiential learning if you will it. And the opportunity is not just for your president, it's for everybody to do that if you will it. So what's the future going to be like? People sometimes call me a futurist. I'm not. I think that the future is not something to be predicted. It's something to be achieved. And we need to find the will to achieve a whole new model of learning for a new generation and for a new networked age. Let me end with a thought, if I could. And I've studied thousands of organizations and tens of thousands of individuals. And recently I've been studying nature. And fish come in schools, bees come in swarms, starlings come in something called a murmuration, especially over the moors of England. Murmuration, you heard that word? Anybody? It refers to the murmuring of the wings of the birds. And it's an apt metaphor, I think, for this new age of networked intelligence. Throughout the day, the starlings are out over a 20-mile radius doing their thing, foraging for food and so on. At night, they come together, and they create one of the most spectacular things in all of nature. And the murmuration has a function. It protects the birds. Look on the right there. You can see a falcon, a fierce predator, being chased away by the collective power of the little birds. Scientists that have studied this say they've never seen an accident. And there's leadership, but there's no one leader. It's constantly changing, as I just appealed to you. Now, is this some kind of fanciful analogy, or might we actually learn something about it today? Well, this murmuration functions according to the implicit principles about learning that I've just given you. It's a big collaboration. There's a huge openness and sharing of all kinds of information and knowledge in a peer-to-peer way. Knowledge about not just danger, but location, trajectory, food sources. There are rules, the big one being don't bump into anybody else. But there are other rules like don't get too far away. And it has a great interdependence. I tell business leaders that business can't succeed in a world that's failing. And increasingly, we're all interconnected. Well, this thing functions as if the interests of the individual birds are connected to the interest of the murmuration as a whole. And it has a great integrity that gives the birds the courage to take on a most fearsome predator. Imagine, if you'll bear with me for a sec, imagine if we could connect ourselves through some kind of vast network of glass and air, where we could collaborate socially, and maybe through a next generation of distributed ledger technology, blockchain, where we could start to know the truth, and where we could begin to trust each other in all kinds of new ways because it's baked into the platform. Could we go beyond just sharing information? Could we start to share our intelligence? Could we create some kind of consciousness that extends beyond an individual or a school or an institution or a community? If we could do that, we could do some pretty extraordinary things. The learning organization, remember that, Peter Senge, 25 years ago? I'm not sure it ever happened. Maybe organizations are like people. They can't learn unless they're conscious. Consciousness was a precondition. When I give talks, I try and be entertaining because I find people learn more when they're conscious. So, You know, during the Egyptian revolution, the early days, people said Mubarak is too strong. He's going to crush those kids. They can't keep coming out every day. And I argued back then, I don't think the kids will go home, because if they do, they know the consequences, that Mubarak will hunt them down and he will kill them. Just as if this murmuration breaks up, those predators can have their prey. So I look at this thing and I get a lot of hope that maybe this smaller network world our kids inherit might actually be a better one. And that we can create environments that are experiences appropriate for a new generation and a new model of learning. And that this age of network intelligence might be one where the promise is fulfilled and the peril is unrequited. Thanks very much.